Right, folks, we're just going to head into the next speaker. We're very privileged. When I was up at the conference run by Gary in the Millennium, I was able to approach two speakers. And Tommy Kenny from Northlands Treatment Centre just came across straight, direct, no nonsense, just spoke from the heart and a very impassioned presentation. So please put your hands together again for Tommy Kenny from Northlands Centre.
I guess, look, I speak on behalf of Northlands. I'll tell you a wee bit about Northlands in a minute, and I'm happy to be here. I think for myself, it's important that within the role that I have at Northlands, that we speak on behalf of those people that don't always have a voice, those people that are living with addiction, whether that's their own, or as Francis Black talked to you about earlier, about families, because their voice isn't heard anywhere near enough. And I feel that it's part of my job to be an advocate for people that are living with addiction. So it's important for me to be here today. I'm grateful for being invited by Damien and the people from the People's Kitchen. The other part of me is sad today, because I come here and I come to Belfast and I come in the door and I expected lots more people to be here. And that really saddens me. It saddens me because I think it adds to the stigma. It adds to the feeling for those that are living with addiction that we're not that important. We're not that important to society. We're not that important to the decision makers. We're not that important to the policy makers. It reinforces that feeling that you have. And look, I was delighted to know that Danny and yourself, Paul, are here in terms of our local politicians. But this room should be packed. There should be no seats empty in this room. There should be no absence of decision makers and policy makers when we're talking about this issue. And I feel very strongly about that, and I don't make any excuses or apologies for saying that. I think it's a poor reflection on how we treat people and how we see people and how we look at people that are suffering from addiction. The reality is, and I believe in Stormont today we had the launch of the piece of work from Queen's around drug-related deaths for people between 25 and 34, I think it was. The reality is that we know, as of 2021, 350 people a year in Northern Ireland die from alcohol-related issues. That's a person every day. That's before we even get near drugs. We have one person a day dying in this small place from alcohol-related deaths. We have 175 people a year dying from drug-related deaths. To give that some context, we have about 50 people a year that die on the roads. And yet we sit here in a room that's half filled. That really saddens me, and I think that needs to be said.
Sorry, Tom, and how more lucky that here in the as well, should be.
Brilliant, yeah. It doesn't make me feel any better, I have to say that. So, look, as I said, I work for Northlands. I've been around Northlands for a long time. I've been around Northlands from the moment I walked in its door as a 22-year-old looking for help. And I find myself 27, 28 years later standing here representing Northlands. And that, in my life, is probably my greatest ever achievement and probably always will be. But I say that to you not to receive any kind of acknowledgement or gratitude for it, because essentially I'm living a life that I should have always been living anyway. But I'm saying that to you because, like Gary said earlier on, pretty often people that have lived experience are not given a place at the table where they should be. Northlands, like a lot of services that deal with addiction, Northlands was born within the community. Northlands was born as a community response in the early 70s to what was happening in the streets of Derry in terms of men and women finding themselves on the streets drinking. And in those early years of Northlands, the initial response was to set up a place which still exists called the House in the Wells. And the House in the Wells essentially was somewhere where men and women that were on the streets could come and have something to eat, have somewhere to wash, have someone to talk to, feel like they're a human, be respected, be held with some dignity, and be reminded again that they are a human being. And so out of that, I guess, it's a bit like the thing was up around Desmond Tutu, I think, is it, about getting people before they fall, can we move a wee bit upstream? And that was the thinking, I guess, for Northlands at that point then. They thought, well, maybe we can help people before it gets to this point. And out of that, again, a small number of people in the community set about going out, as what happens in Northlands has tended to continue to happen. We go out, and they went out and they went to Canada and America and different places and looked at what was being done in other areas that could be done here, that could be done on this island. And from that, essentially Northlands became what it is today, what it continues to be today. There's two places, there's two kind of parts really to the work that goes on in Northlands. There's the non-residential work, where we see about 800 people a year, which has increased over the last few years. And then we have an 8-bed residential facility that treats people that are living with addiction. It was heartening the program lasts, it's a 6-week program that then is followed up by 2 years of aftercare on a weekly basis. It was heartening to hear Francis Black talk today about family, because when I talked earlier on about the people that have lost their lives to addiction, each one of those people have a family, and that family still lives with and tries to deal with the death of someone close to them through an illness such as addiction. And again, you find yourself caught up in the semantics of this issue, if you like, whether it's an illness or whether it's not, whether it's a disease or whether it's not. And I think when it comes to sitting with people that are struggling with and living with addiction, those words are not important. They don't matter anymore. All that matters is that the possibility exists of them getting well. And so when I listened to Robert today, I think it was a man that was 19 months sober, that's a hell of a story. And so for people like him, it doesn't matter what the words are. It doesn't matter what we want to believe around the kind of the words that we use. What matters is that people get well. So what is it that I want to talk to you about? Obviously, I want to talk to you a wee bit about the stigma that exists within addiction, because we talk about it and we say it, but it's a huge issue and it's a huge barrier that prevents people from getting well. And very often people that are living with addiction are viewed maybe as weak, as selfish, immoral, or maybe even lacking in care for others. And that's the reason maybe why they're viewed as why they continue to engage in their addictive behaviours. Somehow the feeling is that they should just sort themselves out. They should just get some help and stop doing what they're doing. There's also a view that people that are living with addiction are not as deserving of care as those who are not addicted. And we hear it all the time when we hear that our A&E departments are under pressure. And that those living with addiction are adding unnecessarily to that pressure. Again, that they're inflicting this pressure on themselves without any consideration for others. And somehow they should just understand that and make better decisions. If they didn't drink the way they do, then maybe they wouldn't fall and injure themselves. or if they weren't using drugs, then they wouldn't be at risk of overdose and requiring emergency treatment. When you don't know addiction and you're looking at it through the lens of not having lived with addiction, whether that's your own or somebody else's, then you can begin to maybe understand that view. But it keeps people on the margins of our society, because the truth of the matter is that addiction is not a choice. And whilst that's been said many times, I don't feel that it's easily accepted. But in the work that happens in Northlands, when you sit with people, and you sit with people that are struggling and fighting to find recovery, you begin to understand better than ever that it's anything but a choice. Francis Black talked today about the power of addiction, and I feel that that is grossly misunderstood. It's misunderstood in terms of the power that it holds, the decisions that it can lead us to make, which in the cold light of day and to the non-addicted person just look ridiculous, look callous, selfish and maybe cruel. When I sit with people in residential treatment who, through revealing the truth about their life and addiction, a truth that is always ugly, that leaves people living with great shame, guilt, disgust at themselves, and shows me in a clear light, very, very clear light, that in no way would anyone choose to live a life that awaits an addiction. When you listen to the mother who must live with the reality that her addiction has caused her children to be removed from her care, into the kinship of family or the care of social services due to neglect, the mother or the father who has failed to turn up at contact meetings with their children, missed significant events or arrived at sports events or school performances under the influence of alcohol and drugs. When you see the distress and the pain in the father who has begun to look at the truth that he's been absent from the lives of his children because drinking and drugs have become more of a priority, and who has been maybe impatient, inconsiderate, angry around his partner, sometimes even abusive. When you listen to the son or the daughter who talks about how they've treated their parents with huge levels of disrespect and gone against all of the values that they were raised with, trying to come to terms with the type of child that they've been to their parents. When you listen to the young man who's found a way to fund his drug addiction through dealing drugs, becoming involved with crime and paramilitarism and paramilitary gangs, having his life threatened, being beaten or shot, his family home filled with fear and worry, while they await for the knock on the door to say that a debt needs to be paid or their son will be shot. When you listen to the young woman who has destroyed all boundaries in herself around self-respect because she believes and she agrees to the treatment men expect from her that will get her acceptance and access to drugs and alcohol whenever needed. When you sit with people who have lived these lives, and we sit with them at Northlands on a daily basis, people who must face the truth of this, even though there is no way to turn back time, to undo the things that have been done, to take back the hurt and the pain inflicted on people who didn't deserve it, you begin to feel their pain. You begin to feel their distress, their shame, their guilt, their disgust, and their disbelief that they have to carry the responsibility of all that has gone on through their addiction. It is then that you can understand that there is no way this is a lifestyle choice that people want to be living. When you think about the power of addiction, you think about the reality that there is nothing that could be offered to the mother or father that would allow them to trade time with their children, the happiness of their children and the joy of family life. But when we live with addiction, somehow we find a way of dismissing, minimising, justifying, explaining or rationalising these things, all to allow us to protect our addiction and allow it to be part of our life. Families suffer. Families suffer greatly from addiction, and very often addiction in families can be a huge determinant factor as to how that family functions. The decisions that children make for their future. Francis Black alluded to it, one of the greatest things that runs in families where there is addiction is confusion, as they struggle to make sense of all that is going on. Questions like why he or she can't realise what they're doing. Surely if they loved us, they would stop. Why are we not enough? Getting caught in the struggle to know what is the best thing to do, to stay or to go, to challenge or ignore, getting caught in your own guilt, initially trying to change the problem, then becoming worn down by it, to the point where a deep sense of apathy sets in, and the feeling of this is how life is going to be, so we may just get on with it. The ability of a family to continue to love someone who has treated them so poorly through their addiction is an incredible thing to witness, and says a great deal about the capacity of the human condition to see the best in a person and to stay at a distance in the hope that maybe someday things will be different, and that they will find their way out of the darkness and into the sunlight. We know that there isn't always a happily ever after. Especially with addiction, sometimes people don't find a way out. Lives are lost and loved ones are left to pick up the pieces of a life that has been decimated by addiction. But we also know at Northlands, and it's probably the thing that sustains us and has sustained us for close to 50 years, we know that recovery is possible. We know that recovery is possible, and we know when it is found, it has the most incredible transformational power in people. Some of the most genuine, humble people that you meet are people that are in recovery. Those who've been written off by many others found a way of not only surviving but thriving in life, being someone who adds to people's lives rather than being someone who takes from it. Witnessing someone who returns to their own value system, their own code for living, and through doing that nurtures the goodness in themselves as people, the spirituality that grows within themselves, which is strengthened by living a life based on making sacrifices for the benefit of others, is a beautiful thing to be part of. To see families reunited, relationships healed, children being born out of recovery, people achieving their potential and feeling that person's sense of pride and dignity returning is something that Northlands will never tire of. Recovery can be incredibly difficult to enter. It takes great sacrifice, humility, acceptance, change from within, and a move from living one way for many, many years to a way that you either have never known or which has been part of your history from many years ago. That change is a process that takes time, and in many ways is always an ongoing process rather than a defining moment. It requires perseverance, commitment, and an understanding that you're going to make mistakes, and maybe we'll have to spend a lot of the early part of recovery stepping away from your own worldview. As I said earlier, it's not always achieved, but living sober or clean for some people can also just be too difficult, too painful, and that is a truly sore thing to see in someone that desperately wants to be well, but being well means trying to come to terms with all that's going on in their life, and sometimes that can just be too difficult. It can often sometimes make me feel guilty about my own recovery, because when you enter recovery you want it for other people, and it's difficult to watch people want it for themselves but struggle to find it. But when it is found, when the Billies and the Roberts of this world find it, then it must be celebrated. It must be celebrated because of how difficult it is, and because of the transformational nature in the lives of individuals, families and communities. It should never be taken for granted and should always be recognised that for the ripple of pain, hurt and destruction that addiction causes, recovery also has a ripple of hope, life and a joy that grows and spreads. There are some things that I want to leave you with today. And one of them is that if we as individuals can understand addiction more as a society, we can begin to widen the gateway to recovery for people. If we can become more compassionate, less judgmental, then maybe more people will come forward and ask for help. If those who design the degrees that exist for medical people, for our GPs, for our police service, for our social workers, can see that the benefit of including adequate and significant broad modules in addictions, how much of a difference that would make in our society. Can those who are charged with our justice system not only talk about the interface between addiction and prison life, but also make decisions that can make a real difference in how this issue is tackled? Can we send people to treatment rather than send them to prison? Can we have a therapeutic treatment facility within the prisons for addiction? Northlands was very, very close to it in McGilligan 10 years ago, and somebody thought it was a great decision not to do it. We were at the point where we had a wing in McGilligan identified, the governor was on board, we had a programme developed, and we were very close to it 10 years ago. I think that that's a travesty. Can we continue to educate social workers about addiction and how it moves within families? Because they will be all too aware of the level of alcohol and drug abuse connected to children being removed from the care of families. Imagine what we could do if we could find a better way of supporting these parents to address their addiction, or if the process of recovery was better understood post-treatment for those striving to find recovery. It's always right to protect children in our society, but speak to those mothers or fathers who have tried to navigate the world of recovery from addiction and the journey of rebuilding relationships with their children, and you will often discover that it's extremely challenging. For those who are tasked with the challenge of developing policies, who can influence the decision-making level within our governments and relevant departments, I ask you honestly and genuinely, are you doing enough? Are you really doing enough? And sometimes the answer to this can be discovered in the reality that our drug and alcohol-related deaths in Northern Ireland are showing no signs of slowing down. But that's not the only lens through which impact can be tracked, because we know that services working within addiction are facing a steady increase in their demands. As of the 1st of November, Northlands suffered an £120,000 cut to their funding. To such a small organisation, that raises huge questions about whether or not we're doing enough as a society. We're all too aware that being born into an area with high levels of deprivation increases dramatically the chances that you will suffer from addiction. So when we hear of preventative measures that talk of working with young children to highlight the danger of alcohol and drugs, we must be conscious that if you're born into one of these areas, then even at that early stage of intervention, it's too late. Our government needs to invest adequately in areas to reduce economic and social deprivation if they are serious about doing real and meaningful work and preventative work. Northlands has a vision for the future in terms of the work that we do within offering people the best possible opportunity to find recovery. We believe that people are deserving of a facility that is of the highest standard, both physically and therapeutically. We want to tackle the stigma of addiction by putting a facility somewhere where it is not hidden, because when it is hidden, it adds to the stigma. A centre that is dedicated to many elements of recovery from addiction. A beacon on a hill that says to people it's okay to ask for help. It is right and proper that when you ask for help, you're treated with compassion and care rather than judgment. A light that says help can be found, recovery is possible, and that there is hope. What this looks like for Northlands is a centre placed in the city's Culmore Road, close by the Foyle Hospice. A centre that caters to first contact when there is a concern, that offers outpatient counselling, that has the capacity to allow people to attend for detox and stabilisation, and that follows that through then with a high quality treatment programme for residential rehabilitation and continues on into long-term adequate aftercare. Alongside this, we believe that there should be provision for a small number of people who require long-term accommodation to increase their chances of long-term recovery. Of course, there will be a huge emphasis on working with families, as there's always been at Northlands, as we believe this is a crucial element in the delivery of addiction services. Furthermore, we believe there's a need for a relationship between addiction services and our universities to lead in the most up-to-date research and development of addiction worldwide. Northlands wants to be a leading light in recovery from addiction, and it believes that somewhere like the Northwest and Derry is as good a place as any to deliver this service. We want to do it because people deserve it. And it's our responsibility as an organisation working in this field for almost 50 years to demand this type of service for those who need it. Why? Because we know it's effective. we know that it can change the course of people's lives and the lives of their family, and because we know that recovery is possible. Thank you.